well.
No. Good. That's fine. Perfect. Thank you.
Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem B'Shem Irgin Shir. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov Smith Shlita on Eiruv Shenifsal B'Shabbos, Eiruv that became invalid on Shabbos. The great Tzchus is sponsoring a shir. Call Irgin Shir Tyra 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Harav Smith.
A few summers ago, the erev in our camp was psul, and someone went around announcing that no one should carry the erev as psul. And someone yelled at him, "Don't you know, it's halacha b'ferish, you know how to say the erev is psul, you know how to announce it." And it was very strange, very shocking, and if the erev is psul, how are people supposed to know? You have to tell them that the erev is psul. But he made it as if it's some type of an aveira to announce it. Maybe it was lashon hara, tiftach pel asatan. You know, people are wondering what's going on here. But the truth is, there is a truth to both positions, and that's what I want to talk about today. The unfortunately common question when there's an erev that became psul. Of course, besides the question of should you notify people, there's a simple question. A person is walking with the baby, a stroller, or holding the baby, and the erev is broken. You have to stand there. Someone's walking out to learn. He has a sefer and he has some food and he's stuck in the way. You're supposed to stand there until they fix the erev. But the embassy, even if you don't go away, if you're not in a colony, we're going to touch upon the major yisoidis in Hilchos Shabbos of carrying and other malachas that happen when a person is unaware of what he's doing. B'chlal, could you fix the erev? So we really need one yisoid, which is really the yisoid that really affects the whole sugya. The Gemara in Masechta Bava Kama Daf Vav Mud Beis tells the following story. He had a stone on his lap, and he was not conscious about it. He was sitting and learning, and there's a stone on his lap. Okay, so it doesn't bother. And suddenly he stood up, and the stone rolled off his lap and broke a keli. So now he's a mazik, but he didn't mean it. He didn't even do it. He just stood up, and the stone rolled off. Zok the Gemara in Yenizak and Yechayev. And Rashi explains, Adamud Oilam, no excuses. You damage, you pay. No sob stories. Keep that for later. You got to pay. Le'inyan Shabbos, Meleches Machshavas Asra Torah. But comes to Shabbos, you're not mechuyev. Now the emes, what could he be mechuyev? I'll tell you, Pasha. Times at a Beis HaMikdash, if he does a shoygig, he's mechuyev to bring a carbon. A very expensive proposition. The question is he chayiv in a carbon? So the answer is no. And Rashi explains why. Carbon is shaykh when it's a real shoygig. When a person knew what he's doing, he was watering his grass, but he forgot that it's Shabbos, he thought it's Sunday. Okay, it's very modern, but that's the case of shoygig. He forgot it's Shabbos. Or he knew it was Shabbos, he's wearing his big day Shabbos, but he thought you're allowed to water the grass on Shabbos. Again, he's an Amoritz. But no doubt about it, a shoygig, he did what he wanted to do, and he did it. But it was based on a false assumption. That's a chiyuv chatas, that's accountable. But this person, he didn't want to do malach at all. He just stood up. And this is, the Gemara says, it's lacking meleches machshavas. Now, the word meleches machshavas is not a pasuk by Shabbos. Rashi in Beya, Yud Gimel Amud Beis explains that we compare the meleches Shabbos to meleches HaMishkan. And by the Mishkan, Ataka said meleches machshavas. Rashi there teaches meleches machshavas is umnis, but it's probably lav dafka. The Rashbam in Bava Basra in Hamad Beis says that meleches machshavas it's a choshev malacha. You did it. You wanted to do it. But this misasek, as we're going to call it, he just stood up and unaware of the stone, and the stone rolled off. So he didn't make a premeditated act of doing a malacha on Shabbos. It happened. He was occupied in something and he stood up. So this Rashi explains that since you're not a shoygig, but you're a misasek, that's why there's no chiyuv. So we see a very important difference between misasek and a shoygig. The makar of the p'tur of Mesasek is nothing to do with Hilchos Shabbos. It's a kol Torah kul dika p'tur. Ashechata ba, you have to sin with the aveira, prat Mesasek. And Rashi again explains that shoygig is you mechav do malacha, but you forgot about a fact. Mesasek, there's no kavanah for malacha. Okay. Now, one mashal, I'll tell you, that's very illuminating to the concept of Mesasek. Says the Gemara in Shabbos, and I'm going to just touch it up a little bit. Let's say a person's learning outside and his glasses falls on the ground. And he can't see without his glasses. So he sticks his hand down, picks up the glasses, picks up the glasses, and he also realized he picked up a piece of grass. Apparently the grass was stuck onto the glasses. He picked up the glasses, and with it came a piece of grass. So he did a malacha of talush. He cut off a piece of growing grass on Shabbos. So you think about it, you might say he's a shoygig, but it's not true. He knew it's Shabbos, he knew it's Asa. So this is Kamada Beferish Gemara. I just dramatized a little bit. This Chavin Lagbiyas Atalish, like tomorrow in Shabbos, I am Beis and Beis. He wanted to pick up something that was Talish, glasses. So Lagbiyah, pick up is nothing wrong, Talish nothing wrong. And what happened? Two problems. He cut chuba. So that, as bad as it sounds, is only a mesasek. Rashi is the ashechataba. We learn in Krisus prat mesasek. There's no kavanah whatsoever to do malacha. The malacha happened. Now, when we're children, we said, "I didn't do it; it happened." Nothing happens. He did it, but he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't even think of doing malacha. And Rashi again spells out the difference in shoygig. Shoygig, you picked up the water hose and you watered the grass on Shabbos. That's a malacha gemura. Navas, you forgot it's Shabbos, you forgot it's awesome. Okay. But there wasn't a kavanah for malacha. Now don't be quick to say misasek because people misunderstand. And I'll give you a very typical classical example. Someone wakes up in the middle of the night, Friday night, and he has to go to the bathroom, and Kergeloi, as his habit is, he walks into the bathroom and flips the light on. Shabbos, you put the light on? And he feels terrible, so typically, what happens, people immediately close the light, thinking it's some type of a tshuva. So now it's even worse. But let's say he didn't close the light. So he flipped on the light on Shabbos. How would you classify that? So many people say, well, that's a mesasek. It's not true. Not a mesasek. If he has a neurological disorder and his hand sometimes gives an involuntary motion and his hand flips like this and puts on the light, that's a mesasek. Or if he's learning and he's very involved with his svara and he moves his hand and he hits the light switch, that's mesasek. If he comes into it happens all the time, he comes into a simcha in someone's home and it's very crowded and he brushes by someone and through his back he closes the light. That happens all the time, these new light switches that are very easy to go on and off. That's mesasek. But this person put on the light biyadayim. It wasn't a neurological reaction. What then? He forgot a Shabbos. Okay, that's a shaygig. A very different story. Rabbi Shmuel Berman once said that this is a beferish Gemara. This distinction. The Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel, and this is Shabbos Yud Beis, Rabbi Shmuel said, I'm not worried, I'm going to learn I'm not worried I'm going to do anything wrong. And he ended up, he was Kar V'Hitam, and he wrote down, when this mikdash will be rebuilt, I'm going to have to bring a Chat Shmeina. So what do you think Rabbi Shmuel did? He's Mechal Shabbos, Chas V'Shalom. So Rabbi Shmuel Berman explained, Pashit, he was involved with his learning, and he got so involved that he was just mata it as he's thinking about what's shot in the Rashba. But that is not a mesasek, that's a shaygig. And therefore he's chayiv in the carb. So now we see clear, masayin, like all of Hilchos Shabbos, all of Allah I should say, masayin. Don't go too fast. You have to make a distinction between shaygig and a mesasek. What's the nafkamina? Big nafkamina. Accountability. Is there a chayiv shaygig? Is there a chayiv carbon or not? Now, Lamaisa, this, you have to realize that when someone is Mechal Shabbos, even in Issa D'Rabbanan, it's no simple matter. There are more in Shin Lamadal Tzif Chav Hey. A person is Mechal Shabbos, even Midrabbanan, he has to fast 40 days and he shouldn't drink wine or meat and he has to give tzedakah. So the fact that it's a shoygig in a D'Rabbanan is also not a kleinikite. Now let me ask you a question, a very fundamental question. I want to get to our point, hopefully with great clarity. Let's say a person goes away for Shabbos to a bungalow county. Okay, I'll give you a pashta mashta. And he needs a coffee before davening, and they say the milk is downstairs. He goes downstairs, there's a refrigerator, it looks older than he is. So he thinks, the Heintig refrigerators, you never know, maybe you open the door, the light goes on, or maybe you have this feature. Today's refrigerators, you can be Chal Shabbos, they open the door. But this is an ancient refrigerator, I'm not worried. He opens the door, and sure enough, the light goes on. But his mazel, it was an incandescent bulb from the olden days. So he put on a melacha, he did a melacha deraisa. How would you classify that? He did a melacha deraisa. Again, today's lights typically are darbana, but this is an old fridge. His mazel, it's a deraisa, an incandescent bulb. Havar. How would you classify that? Misasik, right? He wanted to open the refrigerator door. Good, fine. Now let me see another question. Let's say you're a part of the bungalow county, and you see this fellow going downstairs, and you said, oh, Moiridik, because you wanted a coffee also, but you knew the refrigerator light goes on, so you couldn't open the door. So let him open the fridge, he'll be Misasik, so he's okay, and I have my milk. What? Misasik's no Issa. If it's Misasik. More so, let's say the Maisa, he's not going there. He said, would you like a coffee? There's milk downstairs. If Misasik is so mutter that it's not an Issa, it's a Gezeres HaKosva, Shechataba, so why don't you set him up? You have a refrigerator at home, you forgot to take out the light. So invite someone in, would you like to make kiddush? Oh, take out the grapes, sure. He'll open the door, the light will go on, and you'll put a towel and open and close the door for the rest of Shabbos. So the question is, first of all, do you have to stop him Misasik? And number two, can you set him up to do it? All the Paiskim discussed this Shaila probably goes back 60 years ago, where it's rather started by the Satmar Rabbi. I heard the Shaila Ad Hayoim. There are people giving Shal Shudas Torah late into past beyond his man. Right, we heard this more than once by Anil Sachag on Shvuas. The Rashiva speaks very dehoibin, but so the question is, can someone that said Baruch HaMavdil come and put down a recorder and tape the one that's speaking? The one that's speaking is still Shabbos Dik Yom Tov. He's talking into a recorder not knowing it. What is his status? A Misasik. I once spoke about this. They all speak about the Chassid Shoita that taped the Satmar Rav on Shabbos. Of course, it was after Shabbos in his man. Are you allowed to have enough from the Malacha? Because the Malacha was done. So someone after came up and says, I don't know about the halacha, but I have a copy of the tape. You want to hear it? It was a very famous tape that they made. But Lamaisa, the question is, can you set up a Misasik? Can you allow a Misasik to happen? So here we have a golden Rabbi Kivega. I mean, every Rabbi Kivega is golden, but this is the Yisod of today. Kivega in Madura Kamas Simon Ches has our question, Mamish. Mi she'eni yadeya shezeh meleches issa. He's about to do a Misasik, and you can fill in any Misasik you want. He's about to Misasik, do you have to stop him? Shkubivega quotes our Gemara in Bava Kama, and it's a little of a detailed tshuva. I'm going to have to leave out the Lomdus, but Ayin Sham. But Kivega builds a Yisod, Kedarkoi B'koidesh Alpi Adnei Hashas, that even though the Gemara tells us Misasik is pata from a korban asher chotaba, it's only pata from a korban, correct, but it's still a Maisa Issa, but there's no accountability. In other words, Shoigig is a Maisa Issa with accountability. Misasek is pata from a korban, like the Gemara Darshans, but it doesn't mean that it's not a Maisa Issa. It means you did something wrong. Yiddishkeit is all about not doing Yisurim. It's a Maisa Issa. And then he says, when it's a Chsarna Maleches Machsheves, L'moshel on Shabbos, Mekalkel, Malachan Shich Legufa is not a deraisa because it's not Maleches Machsheves. And the Gemara that we just mentioned in Bava Kama says if a person's Misasek, it's not Maleches Machsheves. He goes, good, that's true. But when it's not Maleches Machsheves, it's Takamutami deraisa. There's no Maisa Issa. It's not a Maisa Issa. But we all know this, that even though Mekalkel and Malachan Shich Legufa is minator not an issa, it's still midrabanan. So here's what Kivega's golden Yisod. When a person does the Misasek, al pi Torah there's no korban like a shoigid, but it's still a Maisa Issa. No accountability. Maybe better luck next time, be careful. But Lamaisa, he did a Maisa Issa. When something is lacking Maleches Machsheves, it's like Mekalkel, Mechach Legufa, the Midarais is no Issa whatsoever. It's not a Maleches Machsheves. The Torah Nasirah. But Midrabanan, he's still accountable. Zokta Kiva Ega, he explains the Gemara in Shabbos, a Mishnah in Shabbos Yud Aleph, that Chazal said, don't go out with a pin erev Shabbos, because you might end up carrying it on Shabbos. What are you worried about? And if he carries on Shabbos, it's only a Mesasek. Teretz is only a Mesasek is a wrong attitude. A Mesasek is bad. There's no carbon, but it's bad. And therefore he says, regarding our original Shaila, which was his Shaila and our Shaila, you see someone about to do a Mesasek, can you let him do it? So Kivega emphatically no. He's doing a Maisa Issa. And certainly to set him up to do a Mesasek is absolutely wrong. So this is Kivega's big Yisoid. Now, you'll ask me, if it's Mutta Midaraisa, so why is it a Maisa Issa Midaraisa? Teretz is Pasha. First of all, someone has to prevent a Mesasek from happening. Sometimes you could prevent it. L'mosh, the case of the glasses. So he stuck his hand down, reached to the glasses, and tore up grass. Why don't you be a little more careful? You're in the mountains, you know there's grass down there. Look what's doing. Don't just stick your hand in the unknown. And also, and that's Vega's biggest side, since the Maisa, sometimes someone else could prevent you from doing it, we have to establish a fact. Yiddishkeit is about accountability. Someone does a shogegin, there's a carbon. Mesasek is a lower level Issa, but it's still a Maisa Issa. Now, like every word of Akiva Ega, it has been discussed, debated, quoted. But one thing we know, Akiva Ega was Akiva Ega. There's a very quotable quote in the Hagdama to Merayim Esada. The Netziv's son writes about his father, Amayid, that my father, Akiva Ega was Morim V'Kodesh, and every time he mentioned Akiva Ega, his body started to shake from Pachad, Migoy Kedusha Terasai, V'Tzitkasai. And he says a line, a word mamish of Akiva Ega was by the Netziv, Doicha, Kamachu was about the Paiskin. Kilamalach Hashem Tzvakais Hayanechsha Be'enav. If you know Akiva Ega's history, he was a Malach Hashem Tzvakais. So although some disagree, most agree, but for us we have two important factors. Misasek is a Maisa Issa with no carbon. Okay. Meleches Machsheves is also a Patur, Midaraisa, in fact. But like every Drabanan, it's still an Issa Midarabanan. So that's why Lamaisa, our case, if someone's about to do a Mesasek, Avadi, you have to stop him. And certainly it's wrong to set him up. Maybe Taka, you said it. Maybe it's Lefnei Eva in a Mesasek. But no doubt about it, this is the Yisoid. Now I saw this in many Gedolei Achrayim. But if you want to see a nice, beautiful tshuva in the Mishnah Bar and Baron Kopp and the tshuva's Chelik Aleph Siman Hey, Siman Dal Tziv Cotton Vav, he has a Shaila, obviously written over 60 years ago, that about a refrigerator. When you open a refrigerator, either you put a light on or put a motor on. And the question is, if someone's about to open the refrigerator, do you have to stop him? Rabbi Baron quotes this of Akiva Ega. He says, you have to be moicha. No doubt about it, because the Maisa, as the Baron says, Akiva Ega's psak is understandable, that a Mesasik is doing a Maisa Issa, just as no accountability. But if you could prevent a Mesasik from happening, avad you have to. So this is the Maisa, the psak to our Shaila. Don't allow a Mesasik. You see someone going to the refrigerator and opening it, he's a pure Mesasik. And he's not even mechuyev to think he's doing an Issa, because it's an old refrigerator. Makes no difference. I'll give you a treat. We're very busy making sure the vegetables have no bugs. So someone once asked me, he thought it was a nourishing question, it was a good question. He says, and if there is a bug or two, I don't want to eat bugs. Why could we say I'm a Mesasek? And the emes said, don't forget, Mesasek has nothing to do with Shabbos per se. Mesasek is called Terakul Dike'issa. So the emes is, if you're alarmed, they say, wait a minute. The Gemara says Mesasek is Potter, except for Chalav and Barayoy, Shekei Nena. But the answer is that's not a kasha. No one's Nena from the insects. You're Nena from the lettuce, not from the insects. Chalav Marais gives a hana, but you can't say you're Nana from the insects. So the real teretz is, if it's muhzik b'teloyim, or you should check, and you eat it and don't check, you're not a mesasik. It's amazing. But I'll tell you why the kasha is a good kasha. In Chuvas Van Hog's Chelik Dalet Siman Kuf Tzadik, he writes that he heard that Rabbi Salanta once wrote to Rabbi Kiva Eiga this very question. And if there's a bugger too, so why can't it be mesasik? And Rabbi Salanta was surprised he didn't get a response. The golden Gadol Ador didn't respond. So he once met Rabbi Shlomo Eiger, Rabbi Kvega's son. He goes, I sent your father a letter, and he didn't respond. He goes, I know all about the letter. It was my father's anibus, because there's a Rav, a Paisik in Salant, where Salant lived. There was a Paisik about here, Salant. He didn't want to encroach someone else's, territory. He wouldn't pass anyone when you have a Rav. But the territory you should know, my father said, is L'shitasi. It's not a kasha, because if Kivega held the Mesasik is a Maisa Issa, even though it's a Mesasik. So he has no problem with your problem. Mesasik is a Maisa Issa. Okay. Now let's talk Tachas of our Shailam. Okay? Lamaisa, the erev is psul. Now I want to make a point to whom may concern. I'm talking about when the erev is vadei psul. I'm in the camp long enough. Some people say, "Oh, the erev is psul." They don't know ben yaminam l'smoilam. The Gemara tells in Yuma, "Shleilahabis esam." Don't scare people. Don't frighten people. It's the erev is psul. First, find out is it psul. We once had something that there was a lechi from 20 years ago. Someone saw there was no string. Oh, the erev is psul. First, find out if it's psul. If the Rav said it's psul, where do we proceed from here? So Rabbi say, this is mamish, our shaila. When someone is carrying an erev l'chayid, and the erev has a chazaka, had a chazaka, and he's carrying, but little does he know the erev is 100% psul. What is his status? He's not a shaygig. This is a bona fide misasek l'chayra. He doesn't know that he's carrying out of the erev. I'll say, but what do you mean? But he knows he's carrying. So if you look at the Gemara in Masechta Shabbos, one of the cases of a mesasek is he sava reshus hayachid, v'hoyer reshus harabim. Zog the Gemara in Shabbos Ayin Gimel, that's called a mesasek. He was not mesasek in Maisa Issa. So oy bazoi, I know he knows he's carrying, but the Maisa, why is that a mesasek? And the emphasis is, I saw an important tshuva, the machshava is be'etz a siman tezayin. He Taka says this approach. He says if you see someone carrying and there's no erev, the erev is broken, then you have to tell him. He says, plus my experience shows that lemaisa, when you tell people the erev is broken, they don't listen. It's only a chumrah, it's this, it's that. And they can't stop carrying all of a sudden. They live in a colony for all these years, and all of a sudden you can't carry. They're stuck in the middle. The baby's in the street. It's probably only the lichatchila. So obviously he assumed like there's no ma'aseh issa. However, for us, we have Rabbi Kiva Eiga. It's a problem. You are witnessing a chilul Shabbos that taka is not chayiv in a carbon, but it is a chilul Shabbos of mesasek. And that's why lemaisa, it's not the most popular job. But about you have to announce the Chutshani. That's a Misn Karelitz in Chelik Aleph Amud Kuf Ayin Gimel. He writes, if you see someone that's carrying an erev and he's mesasek, kvar nokat agonim kiva ega, that it's the mesasek, that he's that, you have to stop him. And he adds, listen to this lashon, Yadua minig b'chol tfutzas Yisrael. Wow, like that when there's an erev problem, we notify the olam that the erev is psul. So although it's a mesasek, but it's still a Maisa Issa. Now we would add that La Maisa, I did see the Orcha Shabbos in Perek Chav Gimel, Ois Kufnun Zayin, he quotes up Shmuel Oya Bar Suchaynu Levacha, says a very beautiful yisoid, that when someone has something in his pocket, and he has no idea about it, someone put it in, he has no idea about something in his pocket. So that's not Moleches Machshavas, right? That's for sure, he doesn't need to carry. But let's say someone's carrying a Gemara, thinking the erev is kosher. So he's a masasik, you're right. But there's no chsar moleches machshavas. Because he knows he's carrying an item. So it's not as good as a regular masasik that's typically not moleches machshavas. Here he knows he's carrying. Which doesn't change much, but it's a big insight. Like if someone was looking at me before, what do you mean? Why? He knows he's carrying. True. He knows he's carrying, so it's not chsar moleches machshavas. But at the end of the day, it's still a masasik. because it's like Mischai, he thought it's Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah. And Lamaisa, that's why in Pashtis, about you have to tell people. However, we come to something that I can't fully understand, but I'll share it with you anyhow. We find in two places in Shulchan Aruch, in Shas actually, that when someone is doing something wrong, which is now, he's not fully aware it's awesome, he thinks it's mutter, whatever it is, he's hazy. And you tell him you're not allowed to do that, he'll continue doing it anyhow, then you're making more harm than good. Because till now he was a shoygig, and now you're making a mate. And that's called mutav shoygig v'ayiyah mezidin. The Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch and Reish Samachei Sivav, regarding women that sit by the outside of the erev and they really shouldn't do it, and you tell them to do it, they won't listen, so let them do it. Because you're not going to gain, they're not going to listen. Or more commonly, in Taf Reish Ches, Sif Beis, or Hilchas Yom Kippur, for some reason women ate beyond the Zman of Pesach Yom Kippurim, and tell them, but they don't listen, then don't tell them. Now listen to this. Again, I can't explain it, but I'll tell you what I saw. The Nesiva Shabbos, in the end of Perek Tezvav, that's B'Yankel Bloi Seifa on Hilchas erev. He was a Yishalmi from Daaoreytah. He says that he saw in a Seifa Tuv Yushalayim, Rabbi Yadla, who was the Mun on the erev Yushalayim, that he was Mekabel from the Aderes, the Goyin Oilam, who was the Rav Amir and became Rav Yushalayim, that when the erev breaks, don't be mefarsim that it's broken, because people don't listen. Mutav shoygig. Now this is a practice 150 years ago in Yerushalayim, Shalmayla. No one listened. No. Then he quotes Rabbi David Baharan, also one of the Nekiyah Yerushalayim, not to announce that the erev is broken. He quotes the Ktsois HaShulchan that I looked up, Taka, in Kuf Hey Chavav, that the minig is not to announce a broken erev. And more recently, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman in Shmir Shabbos, Yud Zayin Kuf Lametes, and this is a Ksav Yad, what he wrote, not Ish Mipi Fish, whatever people misunderstand. He wrote this. The Bechol Oifin, don't announce that the erev is broken, because people end up not listening, and mutav shoygig. Now, I always thought Yishalayim was Yishalayim Shel Zahav, and it was Mamish Gevaldik. Maybe there was an element that didn't listen.
It could be it was an old Yishalayim.
Yeah, could.
Had a choimer. Could be
but then it can't be puzzle. And now he's talking about the erev was puzzle. Someone told me he knew the history. Taka, they were reform, conservative. I don't know. But Lamaisa, it's not a machloikis in halacha. If people will listen, why do you have to tell them? They're being mit'asek. But the B'tzia seems to be that he said, apply mutav shoygig. But I want to add, if you're concerned about this, then it's much worse than mutav shoygig. Because till you say something, what are their status? Misasek. Misasek is much better than shoygig. You make him a misasek to amaze it, better get better. So Lamaisa, it's interesting. Rabbi Nisaker else was a Bnei Brak. Maybe Bnei is different, I don't know. But he says, Kvayadum, Meforsim, everybody knows all about it. Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, when he's asked, he says, why do you tell people about the erev? One of the Heineke Svarim says it's a toyis muta that people say that don't tell people about the broken erev. So I'm getting the cuts al cuts. But like everything else, it has to be that it's totally in your clientele. Who are your listeners? Are your listeners listening? Rav Moshe was asked in Chelik Bey Siman Lamed Vav Archayim, a typical question of 60, 70 years ago. The Rav asked Rav Moshe in all innocence, I like to announce before Tkiyah Shofar, no one should talk until Kaddish Eskabel. But most people don't listen to me. Should I apply Mutav shoygig? So Moshe said, well, two things. Some people listen, yeah. So that's also, so you have to tell them. And also your job as a Rav is to tell people. You know, a Rav that doesn't talk when he's not listened to should get a different job. So maybe that was a chiddush, even if few people listen. But let's say most do listen and some don't. So it's very hard to understand. But what I saw, the Nesivas Shabbos that I mentioned, he himself concedes, if it's just individuals you're talking about, let's say you have a backyard erev, you have a two-family house, a backyard erev, it's psul. So how do you tell the people? You have a camp, you have a Heilige camp, you have a bunker colony, a Heilige mansion. People won't listen. So it's hard to know exactly what the background was in Yerushalayim. When I found Mamash a treat, a sefer reprinted recently, Madane Shloima, in the new print, on with Kuf Chaf Aleph. This is someone, the Mechaba of Yom Teshenu Kachasei, very reliable. He says he himself asked Rabbi Shlomo Zalman. There was a yishuv that had a broken erev, and it was negeh. He found that Friday night. He went to Shlomo Zalman on Friday night. What should I do? So Shlomo Zalman said these words, and it's mamash for us, music to our ears. Zok Reb Shlomo Zalman, and I quote, he says, it's Yadua that Reb Chaim Brisker and Reb Simcha Zelig, the Rav of Brisk, the Pesach of Brisk, both held not to announce that the erev is psul, because they were concerned about mutav shogegin. But then he gives a beautiful hezbollah, and he says, I lemaisas, the person that's carrying, he knows he's carrying on Shabbos, he just doesn't know about the erev psul. How can you call that a misasek? He says, we paskin that if someone thought that it's a rishus yachid, and it was a rishus rabbim, that's a misasek. We paskin like Rava. Abaya taka holds, he thought rishus yachid, rishus rabbim is not a misasek, because he knew he's carrying, but we paskin like Rava. And then Shlomo Zalman explained, the hezbollah is when someone's carrying in his house, or like I said, in a place that's mukav chayma. So you're not saying he's carrying, but there's a heta because an erev. It's just a yachid. When you have an erev up, we look at it as if it is Rosh Hashanah. So this person thinks he's Rosh Hashanah. He knows he's carrying, but he thinks it's just a yachid. And Shlomo Zalman clarified not to announce the erev is broken. Now this wasn't so long ago, like Reb Dava Baran or the Aderes. So I'm just going to present what I saw. I spent some time, but what's interesting is that the fact is that if you know people will listen, and again I think the minhag today, Akaponim, is that we do notify people in a colony, in a camp, it's workable, it's doable. Maybe in a big city, maybe people had their food in the baker's oven, as we know, they didn't have their own ovens 150 years ago. But no doubt about it that this point has to be understood, that when someone is carrying, so it could be one of two cases. Either he doesn't know that he's carrying b'chlal. I'll give you a mashal, I think it's important to mention. Let's say you see someone walking in the street and a gartel is hanging out of his pocket. And this man doesn't wear a gartel. Plus, this person is very erlich, he goes to Minhag HaGra and the Rav Shechner, that on Shabbos he puts nothing in his pocket. Because if you have to check your pockets before Shabbos, Zok the Rav and Zok the Goyin, Kolshken don't put in your pocket on Shabbos. So he doesn't put anything in his pocket. And you see he's a gartel is sticking out of his jacket pocket. What happened? Very posh. He came to learn Shabbos afternoon, hung up his jacket in the coat rack. Someone, by mistake, put a gartel into his pocket. And now he's carrying, totally unaware that he's carrying. Okay? Why do I say that? Because the Chaim Brisker's quote is saying, someone came because I can't believe it. I walked out, I had some in my pocket, I carried, I feel terrible. What do I need a kapara for? So Chaim says, the carrying, you're misasek. With your oiven issa the rabbanon, you didn't check your pockets. So when someone doesn't check his pocket and he's carrying, that's an avla. Forget about misasek, it's an avla. But let's say this person did no avla. Someone put something in his pocket, he was unaware of it, he didn't have to check his pockets, he's an erlich yid. How would you classify that? That's a full-fledged misasek. He doesn't know he's carrying. But hu adin, our case, tak according to Abaya in Shabbos, Ayin Gimel, it's not a misasek. But we pass him like Rava. So that's why Lamaisa, the minhag is, I could say, at least in our context, not a big city, we announce it, and hopefully people will listen, but you certainly could assume the Rav will listen. Now, let's say the next group of questions is a little more challenging. You announced it, and now people are stranded. One fellow is with a stroller in the lawn, one person is walking with a Gemara towards the Beis Medrash. What do you do when you hear that the erev is psul? So the emphasis is that this same exact shayla is when a person doesn't have an erev. He's walking in Rosh Hashanah and he feels in his pocket, I'm carrying. So that's takan av, like I said, he should have checked. But what do you do when someone realizes that he's carrying? So this could be and will be, Be'ez Hashem, a shift for itself. It's not a regel achas, but we will do a regel achas because we have to give guidance. So we're not going to go through the whole lumdis, but basically, when someone is carrying, either he's carrying, he thought it was an erev, and now he told it's psul, or he's carrying into something in his pocket, what should be done? So the Welt says with a Muna Tmima, keep on going. That makes no sense. Well, keep on going. Till when? Till Havdalah? Oh, it doesn't sound. Also, every dollar amos that you walk in Rosh Hashanah is another issa. What do you mean keep on going? What they mean to say is, don't stop suddenly. Because when someone is carrying and he's a misasek, so far pretty good. I mean, not good, but pretty good. But once he stops, knowingly, he's making an hanacha. Hanachas gufay, kanachas chayfetz. So right then and there, he did part of an issa. So that's why they don't mean to say keep on going till Motzei Shabbos. That's ridiculous. But keep on going until you know what to do. Now here's the problem. If you're a Talmud Chacham, you'll know what to do. But let's say you're not. You need time to think. So to keep on going indefinitely is wrong. Every Dalet Amis is a new Ma'aseh Issa. So this becomes challenging. You have to do a little of an interesting thing. You have to stay within a Dalet Amis radius, approximately 6 feet, and keep on going around. Within Dalet Amis, now you have to make an imaginary box of 6 feet, Dalet Amis, and stay in that box. So besides being difficult, because you get tired after a while, it's not so safe. A policeman says, "What are you doing, sir?" "I can't talk to you now. I can walk around." And so they'll think you're crazy. "What are you doing, walking around the street?" But Lamaisa, if you're not a Talmud Chacham, you have to think what to do. Maybe someone will tell you what to do. But Rabbi say, very briefly, the halacha b'li taima, the best eitzah would be is if you could find a Mokem Patur. Now, to make a long story short, a Mokem Patur, there's a Shus Rabim, Shus Yochid, Karmelis. Mokem Patur is a non-Mokem, is a neutral area that there's no Chilul Shabbos from Shus Rabim to Mokem Patur. Why? Chazal said it's too small to be a Mokem. Now, Lamaisa, this is rarely applicable. That's the problem. First of all, the only heter to put it on a Mokem Patur is if the Mokem Patur is within your Dalet Amis. To walk to Mokem Patur is not justifiable because you're going Dalet Amis Shirabah. Number two, Mokem Patur has a specific detail to it. It has to be less than Dalet Tvachim, al Dalet Tvachim of the surface area. Like this tender is probably this tender is bigger than Dalet al Dalet. Imagine half the size of the tender. So if you find an item in Rishus HaRabim within Dalet Amis that's smaller than Dalet Tvachim radius, you could put it down in Chatchila. Now, it could be a biohydrant, and it is an option. I say could be because if you have an item you put on the biohydrant that's bigger than the biohydrant, it's going to fall down. So you can't say, I'm going to put it down, and if it falls down, it's not my problem. If it can't stay on the hydrant, so you didn't put it down on the hydrant. If you have a small ring and you put it on the hydrant, maybe it makes sense. The meters used to be a Mokem Patur. Today's meters are high. Now that's very good, Gradim, because the halacha is in a Karmelis, as opposed to Rabbim, there's no Mokem Patur unless the Mokem Patur is higher than 10 Tvachim. And the meters, some of them are 5 or even 6 feet. So the new meters are Mokem Patur. But again, it's very improbable that Punkt Your Mazel, you're going to find a Mokem Patur within your Dalet Amis. So then the best eitzah is Mokem Patur, but it's usually not Negei. There's another eitzah which is also good, but has to be applicable. And that is basically, let's say you left your house or bungalow, whatever it is, and you're carrying, and you realize you know how to carry. So if you didn't yet stop, since you left your bungalow house, you've been walking straight, and you heard the air is broken, so keep on going, but make a U-turn, complete U-turn, and head back to your bungalow house where you came from. In other words, try to redeposit the item where you took it from. Since you never stopped at any time from when you left, so basically you're going from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaYachid through the Rishus HaRabim. You don't make an Akira or Anacha Be'issa. So so we'll get that soon. So this, if it works, it also resolves the problem. But the problem, of course, is if you ever stopped, then you can't go weiter because that's a new Akira. More than that, if you're in a street, like in the city, there's a red light. You get the red light, what do you do? It's not Yoreg Vayavar, right? So if you're really creative, you could be like the joggers and stay in your place and keep on jumping or moving, walking around. It's just not so practical. But if Lamaisa, you could find a way of keep on going without stopping, that would be the Eitzah. Again, it's up to you. If you know you could do it, in a bungalow colony, it's pretty easy. You go back to the bungalow. Now, the only problem is when you go back to your house, if you're living in a city and the door is locked. You have to stop to get into the house. You have to open the lock or use a key, whatever it is. So that's why often there are technical difficulties. Now going to someone else who's a yachid is an eitzah also, but it's better to go back to your own. This way you accomplish nothing. Going to someone else who's a yachid is an alternative when there's no alternative going back to your own. But the Maisa, these eitzes work. The Noid Behuda in Dogam Rivav, Reish Samach Vav Sif Kot and Yud, he says, this Shaila, the eitzah is to go back to B'shis HaYachid, but he adds a word that's a Beferish Gemara. Zok there, Ein L'takana Ela Loretz, Uvelachzor, La'oish B'shis HaYachid, Shehoitzi Misham. Zok the Noid Behuda, you have to make a U-turn and run back to your house. Now he does say your house as opposed to someone else's Yachid. What does it mean running? So this is a Beferish Gemara. The Gemara says in Shulchan Aruch quotes it in Shin Samach Vav Sif Yud Aleph. If someone's carrying something expensive item, he's allowed to run back to his house and put it back where he took it from. Why run? So the Shulchan Aruch Gemara explains, because if you're going to walk, you're going to forget what you're doing, and you might stop to wish good Shabbos to someone or start learning with someone. You have to make a constant hecker that you're an emergency. You can't stop. You have to put your lights and sirens on and run home. So then you have to run home. Not easy to run. Some people can't run even if there's not an emergency, even if it's an emergency. So running, sometimes a person feels strange running. But the point is, all these eitzes work, but they're not very practical. If it's a long distance, you have to run home. Rabbi Moshe B'chlal in a tshuva in Cheli Beis, Kufid Beis says it's only b'di'evid you're allowed to go home, even run home. The truth is, if you don't see a Makom Patur within Dal Ramis and you can't run home, I can't say the best eitzah, it's really the worst eitzah in halacha, but it's the one that's most practical, is as you're going, don't stop, never stop, drop the item, make it anacha b'derech shinui. In other words, when you put something down, you pick it up and you put it down. You have something in your pocket, you're carrying a Gemara. So put a backhand hanacha. If it's something in your pocket, then invert the pocket, let it drop out. Make an hanacha with a shinui. Shinui always reduces the severity of the yisr. Now again, it's not as good as the previous eitzes, because then you almost undid the yisr. Here, you're settling for an Istarbanim. But the maila of this shinui is that it always works. You don't need to run, you don't need to have a Makom Patur, you don't have to stop for a red light. So that's why the best eitzah, of course, is to avoid these situations. Now, a more serious problem that happens whenever the erev is broken in a camp or colony, there are babies outside in a stroller. You can't leave them all day. You can't fix the erev yet, the guy's not coming, whatever it is. What do you do with the child outside? So again, if there's a guy available to carry the baby back into Yachid, that's mutter, a tzarech of a child, stam tzarech cotton, is a chayil shem by sakana. So to call a guy, especially in the colonies, is a carmelist, call the guy to carry the child back. Probably if you don't need the stroller, there's no have to bring the stroller back. But the baby should be carried back, so the guy will be a kvata for now, what could you do? And carry the baby back to the house. If, let's say, there's no guy available, so again, we have to use what we learn in Hilchos Shabbos, and that's called pachais. Basically, a person in the Rishus HaRabim is allowed to walk lechatchila less than Dal Rambam is carrying. Because my Rishus Yachid in Rishus HaRabim is Dal Rambam. So I could sit down on the park bench, take off my hat, put it on the bench, put it back on. So if I walk less than Dal Rambam, I did no Issa. So the Lam will say, okay, I have a good idea. I have some in my pocket, I don't want to drop it down, it's expensive item. So I'll walk less than Dal Rambam, stop, sit down, stand up. Oh, now I have Dal Rambam. Another less than Dal Rambam. So I'll walk pachais till I get home. So the midaraisa, that's okay, because you never went Dal Rambam, Rishus HaRabim. It was always within your Dal Rambam. But then, of course, the Chazal said that doesn't make sense. You're going to end up carrying incrementally. You're going to carry many feet. So Chazal said you don't do pachais unless it's a real tzarech. And to do less than Dal Rambam once is fine. Your hat rolls off, so you run after it, and until you get it, you might carry it a little bit. It's okay. But to do again and again pachais, that's awesome. But our case, there is no other choice. So the paise would better to be than one person doing pachais, the machabet, machlekes, shemem tes gimel. But we paskin it's better to have a few people involved. So get some of your friends. Hey, listen, we're going to make a procedure. We're all kvatas today. Great. So I walk less than Dal Rambam, hand it to someone that's following me. I hand it to him. He takes the baby, walks 6 feet, hands it to the next fellow. So either we have a few people switching off, or two people alternating. I go less anonymous, give it to Reuven. Reuven gives it to me, back and forth. But the way the Mechaber paskins, some say the more people you have, the better it is, because one's watching the other. But yesh oimrim, yesh misha oisam, the more people involved, the bigger chalash Shabbos it is. It's a chalashem. People are carrying. So Mr. Bura says that Lamaisa, we paskin that the ikadin, more people involved is better, because you won't end up doing chalash Shabbos. But only when there's a tzorech. So this case would be a tzorech. So practically speaking, if there's a baby stuck outside and you can't leave it outside, starting to rain, and the guy is not coming to fix the erev, and there's no guy to carry the baby, get a few people, line them up, each one goes less than Dal 6 feet, you have to know how much that is. The average height of a person is close to 6 feet, so that doing Mashayir, I always give this example, I'm close to 6 feet, and when I spread my hands, like I'm doing now, this is my height. As my hands spread out is my height. So if I'm 5'8", so this is 5'8", so you give it a shtickle of Ashara. So one person hands it to the other until you get the baby back to safety. Now, the real problem is when you get the baby back to Rishus Yachid, how to get the baby into the house. Because transferring from a Carmelist or a Sarabim to Rishus Yachid is also even less than Dalaramis. So the only eitzah is, the way the Paiskim explain, come on to another Chiddush, that the person inside in the house, the mother that's waiting for the baby, sticks her hands outside into the Carmelist, which is the rabbin. The person outside puts the baby into the outstretched arm, and the person inside pulls the hands back with the baby. So again, it's not a perfect eitzah. It's reducing it to a modified issa instead of an issa gomer. So Lamaisa, that's why I will tell you one thing. People take children for a walk, and they think he'll make it. Lamaisa, the child breaks down, he's not going, he's crying, he's adamant, he's mamish, he's in action. So then people say, oh, the eitzah is pachais. Wrong. The eitzah is take him for a walk on Sunday. Take a child that might not go and make it back. You can't rely on pachais. You see, it's full of problems. So the eitzah is avoid the issue, not get into it, and try to figure out how to get out of it. Okay. Very often a person inadvertently walks out of the erev. In our camp, the Beis Medrash was next to a baseball field, and typically they didn't make the erev around the baseball field. But it was a very beautiful landscape, very beautiful area. People that came for Shabbos didn't know, walked out of the erev. I once said, someone called out, I have a shayla. So I said, I got a shayla from left field, kipshute, literally. Someone was walking with the Gemara outside of the erev. So that's a much easier shayla. Because there, you tell them the Gemara, make a U-turn, run back into the erev. You have no problem of running, no one's around. You have no problem of putting it back into the house because you walk back into the erev. And most importantly, it's very easy to do. You don't need any Geis Chachma. But of course, we decided we included the erev baseball field also because it happened to an Mechshalim. But no doubt about it, when someone walked out of the erev, it's simply don't stop, make a U-turn, and walk back in. When someone is partially out of the erev, that's a problem. So an item's partially out of the erev, it's out of the erev. So then the Pais can say you could call the guy to bring it fully into the house. Now the last group of questions needs a lot of publicity because the Maisa could save a lot of agmas nefesh. Let's say we have a vadai pasal erev, no doubt about it. And the question is there any way to fix the erev before we have problems? People, if you could fix it quickly, no one will be nichshel. So Lamaisa, the calling a guy to do a malacha is not simple. You know, it's like a Rav once told me, people think that Amir al-Akib is not just a heta, it's a way of life. Amir al-Akib is not a heta, it's not a way of life. To give you a feeling, the Chuvas Min HaShamayim, one of the Rishonim, one of the Balei asked Shilas Min HaShamayim, and he received response. In Siman Dalet he asked about having a guy move muktzah, which by us is shvus to shvus. So the response was, Leisiga bayod, don't do anything. Kisakal yisakal ayari yari. Negeya b'dvrayim kinegeya b'bavas einai. Don't play around with Amir Akum. Yilamaisa, it's muta. Amir Akum shvus to shvus. Bekama mekaymas also cham chizuk dvrayim yoisim mishal Torah. Amir Akum needs chizuk. People think it's just a way of life. Yeah, you have a guy. It has to be justifiable. The question is, when we have a broken erev, and there's a problem of people carrying and babies stuck and so many problems, isn't that enough of a tzorech to have a guy be called and fix the erev? So let's think, what malachis are involved typically in fixing an erev? So typically, again, an erev consists of a string that snapped, that's all. So if you tie the string together, you fix the erev. But tying the string together is often keshel kayam, which is melacha d'oraisa. Sometimes the post fell out of its place, you have to dig and reconnect it. It's also an issa. But what's most important for us, and people don't know this, it's a mechab in Shin Tezvav Sivav, a halacha psuka, that sometimes when you fix something, a mechitza materes is an issa. A mechitza that allows you to do something, for example, an erev. So the mechitza is like an oil. You're constructing a part of a binyan. We look at an erev, we see two posts and a string. It's not true. You look at an erev, you see a wall, you see a rishus, you see a chayma. So if by the string being torn, the erev is psul, and you fix that, ein lecha mechitza materes g'doy lemizu. And the Shulchan Aruch gives that example. But then again, we also know, and this is Shulchan Aruch Shin Zay and Sif Hey, when you have a shvus to shvus, a guy doing malacha d'Rabbanan, you're allowed to do either makam mitzvah. Let's say you don't have chal shal shudas. You've got to bring it. So you have a guy carry it in a carmelis with not just Rabbi Raisa. Or makam tsar, person's in terrible pain, you're allowed to have a guy bring medicine in a carmelis. Or makam hefsid moment. So lamaisa, if the guy could be told to do it only an issa d'Rabbanan, instead of tying the string keshel kayama, he'll make an aniva al gabi kesha, like we do on our shoes. Or, even better, he will tie the string around the nail without knotting it. So, if you could consider that a d'Rabbanan, we'll soon see by Mechitz Materes, it's only d'Rabbanan, this is shvus to shvus. But again, you have to know, sometimes this is d'Oraisa. When it's a d'Oraisa, we're not making. There's a Noid Yehuda in Kama or Chaim Simon Lamed. It seems in those days you have to realize they didn't have lights. And it happened very often that in Elo Yom Kippur, the heiligste momentum of the heiligste tug of the ganze Yom, there was no lights. So they used to call a guy to light Neiros to say the piyutim of Ne'ilah. Yehuda says, people consider that Tzarech Gadol, Kashem Oid B'yayim HaKadosh Hazel Likanes Lepirtze Dechuka, to have a guy do a malacha d'oraisa of lighting a ner. Mi bikeish zois, who asked you to say piyutim? Better sit in the dark and listen to the shliach tzibur that knows it by heart. But to have a guy light a ner on Shabbos, the malacha d'oraisa. So that's why to have a guy do malacha d'oraisa is a problem, a serious problem. There is a sheet of the Bala Itur, and the Ramah quotes him in Reishai involves C Beis, that a makam of a mitzvah of a rabbi, a makam of a tzorech gadol, a guy could do a malacha d'oraisa. But lamaisa, as I told you, the poskim strongly reject that. Besides the Noid Yehuda, who's feidik about that, the poskim, the Mishnah Reishai involved Sivkat and Chavchei, quotes that the Shloah Kadosh was makbid about this, about allowing a guy to malacha d'oraisa. This is Mishnah Sivkat and Chav Gimel. The Marash and the Shloah. So to have a guy do a malacha d'oraisa is a problem. However, and that's perhaps the redeeming factor for today, there's a tshuva from the Panama Erais in Chelik Aleph Siman Lamed, who has a question about having a noah from a malacha that a guy did, and one of the questions the guy did made a erev. So at the end he says, if the erev is psul, maybe you can rely on the Bala Ita that the guy should fix it, even if need be a malacha d'oraisa. We don't rely on the Bala Ita even because of the malacha d'oraisa, but a makam of michshol d'rabim, that's the word he uses, you could have a guy do a malacha d'oraisa. Now at the end of the tshuva, he seems to waver somebody, goes, so therefore have the guy do a malacha d'rabanan. But he does mention at one point that maybe the heta would be michshol d'rabim, to have a guy do a malacha d'oraisa. Now you look at the tshuva, and you look at it slowly, you'll see he doesn't say this halacha l'maisa clearly, he just throws in as a possibility. But Re'ez Apela, the Machzah Shekel, in the end of Siman Shin Samachai Hilchas Erevin, he says that if you have no other choice, you could have a guy fix the erev with a malacha deraisa, out michshol, out the bala it is kula. The bialach in Shin Samach Bey Siv Gimel quotes the Tosis Shabbos and this Machsa Shekel, even permitting a malacha deraisa. So, Mishnah Berurah, in the third place, in Reish Ayin Vav Siv Katan Chaf Hey, says even though we don't rely on the bala ita, but b'makay michshol derabim, you could have a guy fix the erev. Now, to me, it's a stickle of a chiddush. The michshol derabim in the worst scenario is only a mesasek. Mesasek is not an issa. I mean, it is a malacha deraisa, but not an issa deraisa. Teretz is maybe he's choish that people are going to know it's broken and carry anyhow. The mezidin. Whatever the case is, I think the right way to say it is the way the poskim say it is, try to have the guy be told do a malachas d'Rabbanan. Again, tying the string and all those things are d'Rabbanan if you do it right. So the Buchacha in Shin Zai and Sif Hey, you tell him to do it d'Rabbanan. What he does at the Raisa, that's his problem. Now the only thing that's unavoidable is, what about Mechitza Materis? So the Shaila is that a malacha d'Raisa or not? But one thing for sure, even if it's the Raisa, we have this heta of the Panim Eirais, Machtashek, Mr. Berurah quotes it, a malacha deraisa even is muta b'makam of michshol derab. So lamaisa, no doubt about it, when you're afraid that people will not listen, or you could preempt the problem entirely, call the guy quickly, tell him what to do. More often than not, you'll see you don't need a malacha deraisa. The good question that someone asked me, which is a good question, let's say the air broke in the middle of the night, and by next morning everybody was alerted. So now no one's carrying, and today I look at calendar. But people saying, I can't go a whole Shabbos, I have to go out in the afternoon, I got to go learn, I go this. Call the guy just to fix the erev so people could have the menucha of Shabbos of carrying within the erev. Oh. So that you have to be careful. If the guy is doing a malacha deraisa, there's no heta. That's not a michshel derabim. That might be tzarech rab, but not michshel derabim. But if it's a question that people will end up carrying b'mezid, chas v'shalom, so you're back to michshel derabim. And one last question, which is very important to mention, let's say there's no guy available. Is it mutter for a yid ever do a malacha to fix the erev? Let's say there's no guy available the entire Shabbos. So they're in a colony that there's no guy within the tchum. So lemaisa, if a yid theoretically picks up the string and wraps it around the nail, if that would work, that's no is at all. First of all, I wondered about muktzah. No one speaks about this. Why is there muktzah? A string that was attached by an hashmashas was muktzah. No one speaks about it. Maybe that's enough. We could say michshel derabim. But a yid merely wrapping the string around the nail shouldn't be a problem. But, as I told you, there's a problem of mechitza materis. And that's why the Pri Megadim in two places seems to say that for yid to fix the erev is never mutter. It's at least a mechitza materis that's also on Shabbos. However, Rav Ozlin Chelik Vav Siman Memtes, the Shmir Shabbos in Perikut Zayin Sif Lamed Dalid, quotes other poskim that b'makay michshol derabim, if need be, there's no other choice, even a yid could repair the erev. Now I guess they're holding that the michshol derabim is such a strong heta that he could do a malacha. Now it's not a malacha mamish. Hopefully in the mechit materis, hopefully we could classify it as a derabbanan. But the point is that if the erev is psul and people are going to end up carrying, if it's a michshol derabim, again, a yid perhaps is mutter, but again, the Pri Megadim is machmer, it's not kedai. Better would be to call a guy and fix the erev. Rabbi said, I want to thank you very much. This is another wonderful year. I have to thank the Beis Medrash for giving us the achsanya, the beautiful achsanya. Each and every one of you is precious to me when you come every single week. I must thank Taira Rab Simcha Deutsch for all his involvement and mamish his Mesiras Nefesh of the Shurim. On a personal level, Baruch Rosenbaum is a Did Yakar, a Talmid Chacham Muflig. But most of all, I have to thank someone that's not here, but really spreading Torah in a most incredible way around the world, and that's Abba Baruch Bald. People don't realize how much he gave up to allow the shir to be broadcasted and put all over in every system available. There are thousands listening on a daily basis. All the income, any income that he ever had is down the drain, but he's someone that personified what we say in the Akdamis on Shavuos, Tzvi, Chamid, Viragig, De La'oin, Bala'usa. His only desire is to see Limud HaTorah, Abatzas Torah, Avas Torah, Cheshkes HaTorah. The Baruch will help in all of our Shutfim, the Beis Medrash, each and every one of you, Rab Simcha, and Rab Baruch, and of course, Rab Lazar Baruch, to see continued, Siyata Dishmaya, and Atzlocha. We should be Zoycha. The next year should be in Yerushalayim Habnuya. Amen v'amen.
And of course, the biggest yashikach goes to Rav Smith Shlita for spending every day, every week, preparing the shiurim and delivering them b'tuv tam v'das. Shem Egan Shiuter like to give a yashikach to Rav Smith for today's year and all the shiurim the whole year. But Shem after Kaddish be a sikkim of today's year. We also like to remind the item that Beis Medrash made the appeal for the electricity, to have the comfortable air conditioning, help pay the big electric bills. However, it wasn't started yet. We have another Klitnik standing near the door. Please be started by in Yofa. Chadani ben Akasha, Matzkesh Baruch Lazakes, and Sechel Figure Hibron Taimidish, and Emma, the Noy Chofetz, and Sivka Yago, Tevi Yade, Skadol, Skadol, Shnei Rabba, well, the Rama Matos, the Yafu, Konim, Karim, Shita, yeah, can make the high basis, so I go, those man, Karim, yeah, I'm couple costs of shit also was from us in the home of no man. Ali saw a bone about coming in, I'll call Tommy, there's something I'll call man, also, I should also then do what I was tired. I don't know if I'm about in this rock and higher, there's only in the gun, cut him when it's my out of no man. Yes, I'm not my hand to the cost of no man. So, very much, some lady, I'll call you so no man.
So let's
speak up.
Chazal we learned today. First of all, it's important that there is a concept of Mesasek, which means he didn't plan on doing Malacha. The Malacha sort of happened. It's based on a Kolater Kuldika concept, nothing to do with Shabbos per se, of Ashachata Ba. But the Rabbi Kiveg explains, in Mesasek there's no accountability regarding a carbon shogeg, but it's still a Maisa Issa. A Deraistik a Maisa Issa without much accountability, but the main nafkamina is be careful in the future. There's a different P'tur which is more of a Shabbos P'tur, and that is Meleches Machsheves. The Torah Aser Meleches Machsheves. What's not Meleches Machsheves is Mutim in HaTorah in Gansin. With the Rabbanan, it's an Issa Rabbanan of like Mekalkel and Mach Tzricha Legufa. We have to prevent a Mesasik from taking place because Lamaisa there's an Issa taking place. We did say a Shogeg is much worse because it's an act that he did with Kavana. Rabbi Kivege's Yisayid is that Mesasik is also accountable, so that's why we don't set up a Mesasik. Someone's about to open a refrigerator, or someone wants to tape someone's Shal Shudas Torah. Those things are wrong because it's a Mesasik minimally. In fact, even eating bugs when a person is not mechavan to, but if it's there, that's a form of Mesasik, as we saw. Now, some say not to publicize and that erev is psul because right now it's a Mesasik, which might turn into a shogeg. Many poskim say, at least today, in a small area, we could notify the olam, and hopefully people will listen. At least if Roy will listen, that seems to be the minig. Unless you have an unusual crowd, you tell people and they'll listen. If lamaisa, a person in the middle of carrying, the klal is never stop, but you don't go indefinitely. Within Dalar Amis, think quickly what you have to do, and then put it on a makam b'tur if that works. Usually it doesn't. Or run back to Rishus HaYachid without stopping if that happens. But what's the eitzah that works, which is not as good, is drop it with an oifen of a shinoi. A baby is outside, so pachais, one to the other, and you get to the house. You need a little ingenuity to get it into the house. You have to hand it to someone that sticks their hands from inside outside. Walking out of an erev, just walk right back in the erev, if you didn't stop. Partially out of the erev is out of the erev, you have to call a guy to bring it back. If it's an erev is psul, a guy could do a Rabbanan and even a Deraisa, but l'chatchila try to keep it to the Rabbanan. A Yid, some hold a Mekel, but basically a guy would be the Eitzah. Zoma to you all. Smach the mama.
When is the next year?
8 weeks from now.